I'm Jennifer Griffin, National Security Correspondent for the Fox News Channel, and I welcome you to our discussion on the Wounded Warrior Experience, honoring the sacrifices of our military men and women. This marks the 5th year of this program, intended to spotlight the experiences of several extraordinary Americans as we discuss their injuries and recovery process. It also seeks to help destigmatize the often unseen wounds of post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries, and offers support for those veterans suffering from these wounds. This broadcast is produced by the American Veterans Center and is filmed on location at the United States Navy Memorial in Washington, D.C. It is made possible with the support of Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, along with additional support from the Coalition to Salute America's Heroes, Verizon, Aon, Geico Military, and Amtrak. We begin tonight's program with a discussion on the Wounded Warrior experience, their injuries, their reactions, and their recoveries. Our first panel consists of former Navy Lieutenant Jason Redman, an 11-year veteran of the elite Navy SEALs, severely wounded in a firefight in 2007, and after 37 surgeries, now a motivational speaker. Sergeant Jorge de Leon, U.S. Army veteran wounded by an explosion while serving in Afghanistan, and representing Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, wounded veteran from Operation Iraqi Freedom, Staff Sergeant Charles Eggleston. Welcome, everyone. Jason, let's start with you. Tell me about that day in 2007. What happened?
It was kind of like any other day. Overseas, you get into a battle rhythm, you get into a process. I mean, for us, the way we worked is we would get tasked, typically daily, on upcoming missions. On that night, it was a little bit later that we got notified, a senior ranking leader for the Al-Anbar province. And the mission just developed, and we ended up launching on it about 2 in the morning. The target that we took down ended up, the enemy leader actually wasn't there. We had just missed him, as often happens on the battlefield. But as we were searching the structure, we started finding all kinds of ordnance, 155 rounds, a lot of IED building components, things like that. So we started collecting these, and while the external security was going through this, our ED was going through it, some of our snipers started to see some individuals moving from a target about 150 yards away. The ground force commander came up to me and said, hey, I want you to take your team, go out there and, wrap these guys up. We had seen things like this before. The way the enemy worked, sometimes they'd, run out and hide, not fully aware of how we did things or maybe some of our technologies. So took my team, we maneuvered out. It was a pretty densely vegetated field. We started moving through it. We had overhead support that was helping us to coordinate our movement through this dense vegetation. And long story short, walked into a pre-staged ambush situation. We were originally told it was 3 or 4 fighters. It ended up being 7 to 10 enemy fighters, 2 pre-staged machine guns, and multiple AKs. So.
What happened? What was the injury that you received?
My initial injuries, I was stitched across the body by the PKM, so it caught me across the body armor, and then 2 rounds in the left elbow. Took additional rounds off my helmet, left night vision tube shot off my weapon. I then turned to try and make it back to the only point of cover we had, and I took a round in the face. Directly in front of my ear that traveled out, taken off my nose, right cheekbone, vaporized my orbital floor, broke all the bones above my eye, and shattered my jaw.
Were you aware when that happened, and what were your first thoughts after you were injured?
I was actually knocked unconscious, which I did not realize that until months later. Anybody who's ever been knocked out will come to realize that your stream of consciousness doesn't actually recognize it. So. But I immediately knew something was wrong. I was actually out for about 5 minutes, but when I recognized that I was both aware again, I could tell something was seriously wrong. I couldn't think straight. I was having a hard time trying to figure out where I was and what was going on. And finally, it kind of dawned on me, there's something seriously wrong with your face. And I remember reaching up and touching my face, and I could tell my nose was gone. I could tell there was a big hole in my face, and pulled my hand back with my glove on, and in the moonlight, I could see that my glove was totally soaked with the blood.
So you were taken to Bethesda Naval at the time, and you are known for having placed a sign on your door. It was a big orange sign. What did it say?
It said, "Attention to all who enter here. If you're coming to this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds that I received, I got in a job I love, doing it for people I love, defending the freedom of a country I deeply love. I will make full recovery. What is full is the absolute utmost. I physically have the ability to recover, then I'll push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you're not prepared for that, go elsewhere." Yep.
What was the reaction to that?
It was pretty amazing. It was a friend of mine, a guy I later become very good friends with, was a firefighter. He took a picture of it and put it online, and it went viral. And it got a lot of attention both inside the military and outside the military. And obviously it drew a lot of attention to myself, and people wanted to know who was this guy who wrote this sign. And I always tell them, I may have written it, but what I really captured was what I believe is the American spirit. It is the spirit that every one of these guys that are in here, every one of these military members carry. It is what has made our country great. It is the idea that we will never, we're never going to sit there and feel sorry for ourselves. We're going to step up and we're going to overcome, and that's what that sign captured.
You have a wife and 3 children. They were young at the time. How did your friends treat you when they came to the hospital? Before they saw that sign, you obviously were reacting to something. Did you feel that people were treating you differently, that they were pitying you? How were they treating you?
Fellow teammates, no. Fellow teammates, obviously, we had been at war at that point for 6 years. We had seen guys that had been wounded, and we knew that the sense of humor is one of the greatest things that gets us through adversity. So I had everything from teammates saying, "Get out of bed and stop being lazy," to one, I was wired shut, one who actually brought me a bag of beef jerky. So people outside the military, especially even some of my own family members, struggled. It was tough. I can't imagine to look at a family member and with grievous injuries, especially facial injuries, and to deal with that. And I know some of them that was hard to deal with, and I think there was some pity there. They wondered, was this really worth it? And I quickly said, absolutely. Don't ever feel sorry for me. Don't feel pity for me. I'm never going to feel sorry for myself. And
you've climbed Mount Rainier. You've done so many things. What motivated you to climb Mount Rainier?
Honestly, the real motivation was a friend of mine was a fellow wounded warrior, fellow SEAL, Ryan Job. And Ryan had been shot in the face like I was about a year before I had been. And Ryan, in 2009, died from a drug overdose after a surgery. And he had climbed Mount Rainier the year before, so that following year they were doing a climb in honor of Ryan, and I said I will be there. So that was my motivation. I wanted to climb in honor of Ryan, but I also knew that it was a great statement to the American people, to anybody out there, to motivate them, hey, look at us, we're banged up, we've had these injuries, some guys are missing limbs. If we can do this, what's stopping you from getting out and accomplishing your dreams?
What should people never say to a wounded warrior?
I'm sorry for what happened to you. Yeah.
Jorge, tell me about your experience. You're from Puerto Rico.
Yes.
What happened?
We were driving after a patrol in the town of Gasly, where we were supporting the special forces. We were coming back after the patrol. We were providing medicine, care for some villages around Gasly. And coming back, we saw a burial in the middle of the desert. I was driving 2 lieutenants, an interpreter, and my gunner. And we saw that it was weird, a burial in the middle of the desert. So I told the lieutenant what I saw. He told me, let's go investigate. And as soon as I made that right and got out of the asphalt, I saw everything black. I struck an anti-tank mine with my Humvee and blew up, and that cost me my right leg above the knee. I remember the rattle. I remember seeing everything black, smoke, and I don't feel any pain, so I'm trying to get out of the Humvee, but I can't. I have one of my guys from another Humvee opening the door and pull me out of the Humvee, drop me down to the ground. I hear some firefight going on. So of course I want my M4, I want my rifle, I want to be part of that fight. And I couldn't stand up. They keep pushing me down, and I was trying to stand up, pushing me down, until I started feeling a lot of pain in my left leg. When I looked, I saw my bone from my tibia exposed in a few inches outside, and they were working on my right leg. And I was like, the blood is over here. What are you doing there? You know? And that's when I find out that I lost my leg. Actually, my leg was hanging from like half an inch of skin in the back. I couldn't see my leg at all, and that's when the pain hit me. And of course, started screaming and everything. They put the morphine, and that's all I remember.
And where did you wake up after the morphine?
I woke up in a tent in Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan. My command sergeant major, my colonel were there. They actually put the Purple Heart in my pillow, the CIB, Combat Infantryman's Badge, and a cell phone, satellite phone. And they told me, call your wife. And that's all that I remember at that time. And after that, called my wife, told her what happened. She was asking me what exactly happened. I didn't want to say right there, I lost a leg. But I had to. She's Puerto Rican too, so. She kept insisting. So I told her, but I told her, don't worry, I'm gonna get a fake leg, and I'm gonna be able to do everything. And Captain Hook, yeah. And after that, I remember falling asleep, wake up sometimes inside an airplane. The next time I open my eyes, I'm in Walter Reed over here in Washington, D.C.
How do you explain your injuries to your children? How old are your children? You have 3.
Well, I have 3 kids. 2 of them were born when I was injured. My daughter, my latest daughter, she was born after. So they're used to the prosthetic. They never met me without, with both legs. But of course they know the story. I've been in their school doing speeches for Veterans Day and stuff like that. So they know their story. They're really proud. That was one of my worries at the beginning. My wife is gonna leave me. My kids are not gonna, be proud of me. They're gonna be embarrassed when I go to school, pick them up or something like that. And it's been totally the opposite. I mean, they go with pictures and they go, I want my dad to come to the school. Teacher, can he come and do a speech for Veterans Day? I want him to come in his uniform. They've been very, very, very supportive.
What advice do you give someone who's newly injured?
Never give up. It's really easy to go down that hill, and it's not good. I've had to be honest. I was depressed. I feared bargaining. All the bad things I went through them, but having my family there, my friends, the support from my people, my kids, they were my inspiration. I said, I'm not gonna give up. I mean, I lost my leg when I was 31 years old. I don't know what could happen to them. I don't want them to say, Daddy quit. So definitely, the only thing, for me, the best thing I could say is never give up, no matter what.
Beautiful. Charles, you spent 3 years at Walter Reed. You were injured in Iraq, and tell me about your experience, and also tell me, you're involved with the Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation. How has that helped you? How have they helped so many others?
My experience at Walter Reed taught me about liberation, because it wasn't about me at that time. It was about something greater than myself. And I was catapulted inside of what they called a Walter Reed scandal at the time. We was telling the truth. Was telling the story, what's going on. And at that time, the Military Order of the Purple Heart saw me as one of these new wounded warriors that's sitting out on an island all by itself. Because when you blow the lid on anything in the DOD, you get segmented. But with the generosity and the know-how and just the tradition itself, they helped assist me, my family.
What did they do for you? What are some of the specific things that helped you?
I actually had team members. I still remember when I received my last Purple Heart, I was coming across the stage, and I see this old guy come up to me, and older gentleman. His name was Ransom Jordan from the Military Order Purple Heart, and he's, standing proud like he's 21 years old. And I can clearly see he's not 21 years old. He fought in the Korean War. And he was so happy to give me a membership to the military of the Purple Heart. He said, you're about to become a part of a tradition, a brotherhood that you just can't imagine, brother. I'm like, all right. Yeah, I donate clothes to the Purple Heart. That's my first, true look at the military of the Purple Heart, because we always say give clothes, give cars to the Purple Heart. And that's why I thought, I'll give them another bag of clothes and I'll just let it go, And then I started going to the dim, dark light. What I call it, I sum it up as the war after the war. Of course, I was injured in the war. The fight is over, but the real fight is after the fight. After this 3.5 years in the hospital, that's the real fight. I fought with the inner monster in me every night not to take my own life. And sometimes that inner monster won that battle. And I tried to take my own life by over-medicating or doing something crazy, and I just wouldn't die. I was just tired of the pain. I was tired of the surgeries. Just didn't want to be here. Didn't feel like a whole person. And then that's when I started really relating with these guys from Korean War, especially my Vietnam War guys. These guys get the thumbs up with me all day long because they told me about the atrocity that all the gentlemen and ladies face coming back. And I know mine wasn't half as bad as those guys' stories were.
How has Walter Reed improved since you were there, and since you were there at the height of the scandal? How's it improved?
We cleaned up some stuff. Yeah. Yeah, we cleaned up some stuff, and then we took some of that stuff over to Bethesda. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Charles, thank you. Thank you all for your sharing your stories with us. When we return, we will discuss the unseen wounds experienced by many service members and the resources available to them. More from the Wounded Warrior Experience coming up. But first, a special video message from Staff Sergeant Eggleston, representing our presenting sponsor, Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation.
Hello, my name is Charles Eggleston from the Military Order of the Purple Heart. Through the generous support of patriotic Americans like you, the Purple Heart Foundation has been able to team up with the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund to help construct the new National Intrepid Center of Excellence. This state-of-the-art facility will help active duty, disabled veterans, and their families deal with the traumas of war and post-traumatic stress. And we couldn't have done this without your help. We know many veterans, just like the ones you've seen in this program, are still out there fighting a different battle. If you or someone you know is suffering from post-traumatic stress, the Purple Heart Foundation is here to help. We offer a free handbook, which can be ordered on our website. We only ask that you pay the shipping costs. To find out more about the handbook or to pledge your support, please go to purpleheartfoundation.org. That's purpleheartfoundation.org. And I want to thank you.
Welcome back to the Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation. In this segment, we will be discussing the two unseen wounds that have plagued many veterans of our recent conflicts: post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. Joining us for this very important segment are former Marine Staff Sergeant Jeremiah Workman, recipient of the Navy Cross for Valor while serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and U.S. Navy SEAL veteran Lieutenant Pete Scobell, a veteran of 6 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Thank you both for joining us. Jeremiah, let's start with you. Where did you serve? You were in Fallujah.
Fallujah for the second battle.
The second
Phantom
battle.
Fury.
And just take us through briefly how intense that was. You obviously, you got the Navy Cross for Valor. What happened that day?
Yeah, I had the honor and the privilege to lead a squad of Marines into a house that was full of insurgents. They, at the end of the firefight, which lasted 3 hours, they found 36 dead insurgents inside the house. And as a squad leader, you know, it wasn't quite a whole squad, but I had 8 Marines, a Navy corpsman inside while the fighting was going on. 3 of our Marines we'd lost inside the house, and the rest of us were wounded. And as you can imagine, for most of the fight, it was 5 of us fighting a couple dozen insurgents in a, you know, showdown at the OK Corral, in your face slugfest.
Do you relive that day?
Yeah, a lot of times I do. And I asked it's hard to believe that I'm here. I was the point man every time we went in the house. Going up those stairs, and I don't know how. I mean, I took 3 grenades, and I absorbed them in my legs and my sappies, but I don't know how I'm still here, you know.
How did you feel when you heard that you were going to be given the Navy Cross?
I remember the day I was a drill instructor at Parris Island, and they called me in, and it just brought back, it took me back to that house. I'm like, I lost 3 Marines in that house, and I told their parents I would bring every single one of them home. And I felt like I failed, so it was tough. I struggled with that.
And you've described in the past what was really a downward spiral. What happened?
When we got back to Camp Pendleton, it was, you know, I started doing things that were just out of the norm for me, spending money, excessive alcohol, and just doing things that were way out of character for me. And like another panelist said earlier, once you start that downward, you know, once the wheels start coming off the bus, it's hard to keep it on the road. And I just started spiraling out of control.
How did you know you had a problem?
I think I've told this story before. My father-in-law showed up at the airport, LAX, I believe. I pulled around to pick him up. I popped the trunk of my car, and I went to put his suitcase in the trunk, and there were so many liquor bottles and beer cans in the trunk of the car, and I threw his bag in there, and I'm just like punching the trunk down, and it wouldn't shut. And he's standing there and just looking at me like, oh my goodness, or like, we need to talk. You're married to my daughter. But that was the moment, like, I knew something was wrong, but back then, nobody, I don't even know if I knew what I don't know if I'd ever heard of PTSD. You came back, you sucked it up, and you prepared for the next deployment. I got orders to drill instructor school. I wasn't going to say anything that was going to jeopardize my career. I was going to go to Parris Island and make Marines. So I kept my mouth shut, but I soon realized the only way I could go to sleep at night is if I drank a case of beer, or, you know, it really gets out of control.
Did you ever face any suicidal tendencies?
Yeah, when I got to Parris Island, and I got relieved as a drill instructor, and that hurt. And they sent me home to Ohio with my bride, and I was at rock bottom. I felt like my career was gone. I felt I was at rock bottom, and I got up one night and I put a gun in my mouth, and I took a bunch of medication. And my father-in-law, thank God, he walked into the garage, and he found me, and here I am. Thank God.
Thank God.
You know.
And then what did you do to get help?
When I got presented my Navy Cross, I remember standing out there. It was at a recruit graduation. I remember standing out there, and that was the first time I'd heard the citation. I just still struggling with it, but I said, you know what? I'm going to wear this for those Marines. If I can help one person, nobody should hit rock bottom and just stay there and feel the way I do right now. So then my my kiddos came along, and that, you know, that's, I gotta be their daddy. I gotta be there. I gotta raise them. I want them to be proud. But really, traveling around the Marine Corps, you know, I'm leaving for South America tomorrow to speak to Marines at the embassy down there. I really enjoy getting out there and being with Marines, because there are thousands of people that are dealing with this.
And you're at the VA right now.
Yeah, I work for the VA.
That's
Yeah, it's kind of weird how it all kind of comes together here. But I really, like I said, I enjoy getting out there and helping people.
Pete, tell us about your experience. You were Navy SEAL, 6 tours, Iraq, Afghanistan, 17-year veteran. When did you realize you had a problem?
First, I'm just honored to be sitting next to you, brother. I wouldn't normally say that to a Marine, though. But, you know, I was having a fantastic career. I enlisted out of high school, went through SEAL training at 18, spent 4 years in the teams, and then was accepted to Naval Academy, went to Naval Academy, got my commission, came back to the teams, had been on multiple combat deployments, and, you know, I'd checking all the boxes, doing all the things that were right, but then all of a sudden, I just started having serious issues paying attention to anything. I couldn't read emails. I was really just kind of operating on pure instinct at that point. You get so good at your job that you can do the operational part of your job. It's when you start getting into the, you know, remembering things. My wife would put, you know, stuff in the refrigerator and say, hey, there's food for the kids, and she'd come back and she'd be like, why are the kids screaming? Did you feed them? And I'd be like, what are you talking about? But I drove to work one day, and I got to the parking lot, and I looked around, there was nobody there, and it was a Sunday, and I didn't remember driving to work. I didn't know why I was there, didn't know how I got there. At that point, I had 3 herniated discs in my neck, 3 in my back. I had hernia surgeries. I was these headaches I had for about 2 years straight. I'd take about 6 Excedrin a day, and you know, sleeping, no sleep. That's where the issue always comes with sleep, I think, for everybody. And when you talk about post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, there's a comorbidity that the two are very closely linked. And I finally got to the point where, you know, I'm failing at home and I'm blaming work. I'm failing at work. I'm blaming home. And I just walked up to we had a team psychologist. I walked up and knocked on his door and said, hey, I think I got an issue. He was like, well, when did you hit your head? And I was like, well, I've been blown up. I've been, you know, knocked out multiple times. You know, I've been next to hundreds of breaches. I don't know what it is. And he's like, well, I think you're fine. And I got to the point where I resigned. And I just figured that, you know, this was the price. And I was okay with that. I remember sitting in my house and saying, you know what, if at the end of all of this, you know, I'm losing my mind, is pretty much how I felt. Like, I can't remember anything. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm losing my mind, then, and that was the price for all this, then, like, there are guys with no legs, and, you know, there are guys with no arms. There's, you know, quadriplegics. Like, that's nothing. I accept it. I'm proud to do it, and I'd do it again. I wouldn't change anything. And I was sitting at I was getting ready to get out, and I had moved my family to Pennsylvania. And I was staying with living with my old buddy, Morgan Luttrell, Marcus's twin brother. And Morgan's my best friend, and I finally just kind of dumped on him. And in a very Morgan way, he just looked at me and said, hey, you got TBI, you should go to NICO. So when I went to the NICO Center, the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, it's this amazing facility. It's on Walter Reed, National Naval Medical Center. And it was built by the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund, and by private money. And it's the only center of excellence in the world for traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. So I showed up there, and it was really my last-ditch effort. And the first day I walked into a room, and I sat down with every doctor that was going to treat me. And I told my story once, and they said, they looked at me and they said, listen, Pete, you're broke, but we can fix you. And you know, at that point, you get a little bit of hope. And I said, I'll do whatever it takes. And so for the next 4 weeks, I got 93 doctor's appointments. I got 5 MRIs in my brain. I went to everything from acupuncture to yoga, which that's always an interesting thing to do for the first time, especially as a frogman. Yoga, heart math, breathing exercises. They did you know, they gave me shots in my scalp to take away the headache. I slept for the first time. And when I was there, I sat with Jim Kelly. I said, what's the problem? And I would go into his office pretty much all the time and ask him, you know, using analogies, like explain what's happening to me. And I built this brief called The Blast Effect, and the idea was so I could go back and talk to the guys and talk to them in a level like, hey, this is what's happened, this is why it happened, these are the effects, and this is how you can get fixed. And so that was the brief, and it really breaks it down into terms that guys like us can understand. And it's amazing the response I got. The first time I gave the brief, I gave it to a squadron of SEALs, and at the end of it, it was supposed to be a 30-minute brief, and every single guy in the entire room raised their hand and said, man, I have all those problems.
What were some of the signs?
Well, you know, the best description I've ever heard of traumatic brain injury is I feel like myself, just it's harder to be myself. Everything I do is a little bit harder. Your brain is like a city, gray matter and white matter. Gray matter are the streets, white matter are the sidewalks. Those are the neurological pathways. If you were to fly over Washington, D.C. on 9/11, you look down and saw the Pentagon, that's a sports concussion. You can identify it. If you flew over on August 23rd, the day we had the earthquake here, you wouldn't see any damage. But when you got down to the streets and sidewalks, there was cracks in the sidewalks, cracks in the Washington Monument. The damage was on an order of magnitude greater that day than it was on 9/11. And passing energy through a region is the same thing as standing in front of a, you know, shooting a gun. You're passing energy through the cortex of your brain. Your brain's response to that is to send out stem cells to repair those damaged neurological pathways. Well, what they found in NICO is that those stem cells are being killed off by cortisol and adrenaline, which they're produced by chronic stress, chronic pain, and lack of level 3 and 4 sleep. So when you look at a soldier overseas, and you look at the situation they're in, they flip-flop their circadian rhythm. So they're sleeping during the day, they're up going out at night. They're in chronic firefights. They're constantly exposed to blasts, whether that be, you know, law rockets, tanks, AT-4s, breaches, close air support, IEDs if they're getting hit. And then, you know, you have, like I said, stress, pain, and lack of sleep. And so you put them in this, what I call the, you know, it's the perfect storm. And you start having cognitive deficits, and they add up over time, and that's where the memory issues, the sleep comes in. And so it's really, like I said, it's like comorbid, you know, comorbidity. That they put it all together. NICO's the only place that looks at the problem and treats the problem and not the symptoms. So you don't walk out with a bag of Ambien for sleep, Prozac for depression, and Xanax for anxiety in a crowd. Let's figure out what the problem is. Let's return your body to the state it needs to be in and allow it to heal itself.
Incredible. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremiah. In our next segment, we focus on transitioning from military service to the civilian workforce when the Wounded Warrior Experience presented by Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation continues.
The Wounded Warrior Experience is presented by Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, honoring their sacrifice with our service. Additional support from GEICO. Since our founding in 1936, GEICO has proudly served those who serve. We are proud and honored to support this year's Wounded Warrior Experience. And Amtrak. Amtrak's Veteran Hiring Initiative's goal is for 25% of all new hires to be veterans by 2015. Amtrak participates in multiple military hiring events throughout the year and partners with veteran hiring recruitment groups.
Welcome back to the Wounded Warrior Experience. For Wounded Warriors, the experience does not end with their return home and discharge from military hospitals. It continues on as they attend college, enter the workforce, and rejoin society. In this segment, we spotlight stories from veterans who can speak to the professional resources available to those who are transitioning to the private sector. Joining us for this third segment are Sergeant Matthew Pennington, veteran of Iraq and representing the Coalition to Salute America's Heroes, Lieutenant Chet Frith, representing Navy Wounded Warrior Safe Harbor, and Adam Kishleski, a Marine Corps veteran who has been active in a number of organizations, serves on the board of directors for Homes for Our Troops, and just recently graduated summa cum laude from St. Mary's University. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Matthew, let's start with you. Tell me about your experience. When were you injured? What happened? And how was it coming home?
I was injured in April 2006 in Iraq, north of Tikrit. I was ambushed. The job I did was convoy security, whether it be machine gunning or driving the Humvee. That night, we were designated as a scout vehicle for the convoy. We were heading from Mosul, guarding a load that was heading down to Balad. And needless to say, I found the bomb. And
or it found you.
Yeah, exactly. And we came around, we had a military bypass road. It was a one-lane road, so only one Humvee could fit on it, so there's no two-way traffic. And when we hit the north side of the town, they had lit up a signal fire, so we kind of knew that something could be going down. And hit the 90-degree turn, turned around, and there was a IED set up in the road. It was 3 artillery rounds, trapeze. They had a pressure switch running across the road and a small arms fire team to the left. So identified the bomb. I was already in the kill zone, so if all else fails, one of the things we came up is just to bury the engine in that sucker and try to absorb as much of the shrapnel as we could. And so I just floored it, nailed the IED, and just prayed for the best. Couple pieces came up through the floorboard, took my left foot off on the spot, shredded my right leg, just flipped it all inside out. And once that happened, the tractor trailer behind me, we started receiving fire, but the tractor trailer behind me came up and helped me clear the kill zone. And I started steering the vehicle right because the roads over there, we have berms on either side of them, so I was going to bury it into the berm on the right opposite the field of fire. And then when I went down to hit the brakes, I realized I had no legs. I was just kind of bicycle kicking with nothing happening. And so we wrecked it into the berm there. I had tourniquet on my vest, my TC, my gunner was knocked unconscious. We had a ride along in the back seat. Young private, he was just freaking out, and just took the tourniquet off my vest, tourniqueted my legs up, and awaited aid. The injuries resulting were, of course, my leg injuries, but beyond that too, I ended up getting a traumatic brain injury from the loss of blood. I lost 6 pints of blood, so I was starting to kind of going in between organ failures and stuff like that. And they expected me to die in Germany, so they were going to send all my family to Germany to meet me there. And but I just kept living. And
the best revenge.
yeah, exactly. You know, and went to Walter Reed. Found out later there that I had a post-traumatic stress disorder. But in short, that's essentially what happened to me.
And then there was a car crash that really changed your life. As
yes.
if that weren't enough, what you'd just been through.
Yeah, exactly. No, at the time, initially when I was injured, my TBI was undiagnosed. It was in my records from Landstuhl, but for some reason it just, was never brought to my attention, and I guess they didn't read that far back in the records. So I'd moved home to rural Maine, and this was 2006. I was one of the first severely injured guys up there. So they had no services, no programs ready for me. So essentially I went in, I had post-traumatic stress disorder. I was diagnosed with at Walter Reed. And so I was given, just big old bag of pills and sent about my way and stuff like that. But having the brain injury undiagnosed, what it was is you always read on the labels, they say, well, if you feel these symptoms or you feel suicidal or this stuff happening, you let your doctor know. And well, I never let my doctor know because I didn't, think that they were doing a good enough job anyway. So needless to say, one night I got really drunk and I decided to end my life. And so I went up to out just ramming the roads, acting a fool, and drove my car into a brick wall at a high rate of speed. And of course, being the genius I am, I was drunk, so I lived through it without a problem. And then so the cops came out there right on me right after the fact, and I got out the car and smashing the wall and everything just kind of brought back that same feeling of when I got blown up. I got out of the car and I started assaulting police officers. And that was a turning point in my life where I looked back at the career and everything I had done and just said, you know, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with myself? And that's what helped start getting me to the road to recovery. I reached out to the organization I work for now, the Coalition Salute America's Heroes, because I didn't feel that my medical needs were being met in Maine. And being born in Fort Worth, Dallas area, I knew they had a great program at that time for the OAF guys. They raved about it. So I reached out to the Coalition when no one else would help me and asked, you know, just please, could you get me to Texas so I could get down there and get the help I need. Showed up the next day. He said, what are you doing with a brain injury and all these medicines? I said, what are you talking about? And he showed me in the records where I had a traumatic brain injury due to a hypoxic brain injury, which was blood loss, so it wasn't your typical where you have concussions or things like that. And went off all my prescription medications, started learning coping skills, learning how to manage life with PTSD and a TBI, and I just was able to rebuild myself and pick myself up from that point with the help of the Coalition.
Great, great news. Thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Chet, you spent a year in Iraq. You came home to your wife, Heather, and 2 young boys. When did you start noticing some of the signs of PTS?
Actually, thank God for my wife, because she noticed them probably before I did. First time I remember anything, we had gone to SeaWorld for a post-deployment vacation. And there was one of the venues there that it's an aquarium where everybody funnels into this tunnel. And it just brought back memories. And I said, we've got to get out of here. Crowds are in a good place. Obviously in Iraq, if you see a crowd, nothing good's going to happen. So I told her we have to go. She wasn't happy about it, and obviously I don't blame her. But we had to leave. After that situation, I had tried going out to just a store with her. I remember she was shopping for clothes, and I went in the dressing room, and I had to sit down. It was just too mentally exhausting for me. And that's when I realized that something's wrong. And she threatened to leave me if I didn't go and get help, which was probably a good thing. And so I went and got help, and I'm here today. And if it wouldn't be for her, I probably wouldn't be.
And what advice would you have to those who might be recognizing some of these PTS symptoms, who've come back from war? How do they transition to the workplace, and what should employers know?
Definitely right now is probably one of the best times in our recent history, at least, to be a wounded warrior searching for employment. There are different avenues to pursue as far as training. Personally, I was able to participate in Operation Warfighter, which is a program where you do an internship with a federal entity. So I spent the last few months at the FBI office in Jacksonville, Florida. So it allowed me, one of the things with PTSD, you lose a sense of self-worth, you lose motivation. And for me, being able to see something beyond the military, because that's all I've known my entire life, was very rewarding for me, and it built my self-confidence. So, okay, I can actually do something beyond the military and actually make a difference. So for me, that was huge. But there are other programs out there that can definitely assist service members, and there are programs like Navy Wounded Warrior Safe Harbor that were kind of a clearinghouse and able to allow service members to know about those programs. So. And
what could employers do to accommodate people with PTS?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions out there is post-traumatic stress. The person is going to go out and shoot up the entire place. And unfortunately, that's what you see in the media. That's not the case. If anything, it's just the opposite. I don't want to leave home. I'm very comfortable in my room, secluded. But to actually get out there, and we have a lot to offer. And the experience that I've had in combat will help me in pretty much any situation out there in the civilian world, because I'm able to deal with crisis like that. So if something comes out in the civilian world, I'm able to take those skills I've learned in the military and apply them into civilian sectors and jobs.
Thank you, Chet. Adam, tell me about your experience.
So I was an infantry squad leader in Iraq in 2005, just like one of our war fighters that was on the stage just a few minutes ago. I was in a place called Karma. No good comes from an AO named Karma.
That's true.
So we got into a firefight at this school. Not a real big deal. A couple days later, another platoon had gotten in a firefight at that same school. We got some intel that the bad guys were back there, and we went to look for some HVTs, or high value targets. We expected somebody to be hiding behind one of the doors. We had not anticipated it was an IED jerry-rigged to one of the doors. So we opened it up, it exploded, killed the lieutenant that was with me, and I was fortunate enough to leave with my life, but lost an arm and a leg. I didn't really lose it, I just haven't had a chance to go back and get it yet.
I wouldn't go there right now.
I would, it's a target-rich environment.
That is true. And Homes for Our Troops, how have you been involved with them? How have they helped you?
Yeah, so after I got wounded, there wasn't a lot of organizations out there doing good work for the veterans like there are today. We had bought our house, my wife and I, in January of 2006. As you guys know, homes back then cost an arm and a leg, which is a big deal for a guy like me. And we were stuck. It was built on 3 different floors, which is a beautiful home, but it just didn't work for me at all. I didn't even own a wheelchair. I was left leg limb salvage as well, so I really struggled. And after our son was born, trying to crawl up and down the stairs with a small one was just dangerous, and didn't know where else to go. We tried to sell our house, but we couldn't even walk away with what we had paid, and Homes for Our Troops came through and built me a home, and from there I've really kind of just grown into that organization.
How many homes have they built so far?
So far we've built 168 homes. We've got another 53 underway, and we've got 83 more guys in the queue to get into our program at some point soon.
There are so many Wounded Warrior groups right now. How do these Wounded Warrior groups need to evolve for the next phase? What would your advice be to them?
So there are different organizations out there doing great things, and some of them are better than others. My advice, as an administrator, would be find what you're good at, focus on that, and let another nonprofit take on another area. As the wars progress and the needs of veterans change, different nonprofits will stand up, and other nonprofits will go away. Right now there's about 1,900 veterans who we anticipate who need, specially modified homes. Homes for Our Troops' goal is to work ourselves out of business. So once we build, all the homes for the 1,900 veterans that, are out there that need homes right now, we're done. We'll wash our hands and say it was a good day. I think there are other organizations out there that are just standing up right now to help veterans find employment or deal with post-traumatic stress, and as these needs pop up, organizations need to be ready to step up.
Thank you. Thank you all. When we return, our discussion concludes with a question and answer session with our audience. Please stay tuned to the Wounded Warrior Experience, presented by Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation.
The American Veterans Center is proud to host the 5th Wounded Warrior Experience and works to preserve the legacy of all those who have served.
Welcome back to the Wounded Warrior Experience. As we close the discussion, we would like to open the floor to questions from the audience. I'd like to start with Jeff Roy of the Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation.
Well, good evening, and it's not so much a question, it's as a presenting sponsor, it's what we would like to reinforce. People have asked us, why do we continue to sponsor this? And everybody up there tells a story. When we talk about the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, we are supporting that. Our Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation and the Military Order of the Purple Heart, the Veterans Organization, is supporting that with our money and with our time. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that everybody understands that those centers are there for them to go to. So if they are listening to this program and have the same symptoms and experiences that were talked about tonight, do not be afraid. Go to where Pete went, and Pete's story is the important story. They're all important tonight, but his is the important story because he got the help right away. And that's the point we want to make tonight, and that's why we continue to sponsor this.
Thank you, Jeff. Pete, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is we raised another $100 million. We're in the process of raising another $100 million to build 9 of these centers across the country. They broke ground on 2 more centers just recently. We're going to continue the fundraising campaign. It's not just for active duty, because the current center, the way it's designed, is that it's for active duty, and it's very small cohorts that go through 5 a week. So we're limited in the amount of people that we can treat. But with the new centers, there'll be satellite centers, and they will also be inclusive of veterans as well. And so the idea is to take best practices, kind of the same thing we do in the military, tactics, techniques, and procedures, what's working, what isn't working, pass it out to these centers, and be able to reach out and get people in remote places that need the help. So, the military Order of the Purple Heart, these guys are fantastic. They donated almost $1 million at this point to building these facilities, and their dedication has been just, 100%. They're all in. And the other side of the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund is that 100% of the donations go towards building these centers. I mean, right now we talk about these different nonprofits that are out there. We start looking at, which one's a good one? Where am I going to send my money? Where's it going to have the most impact? And we can tell you right now that the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund they walk the talk, and they're actually making a difference in people's lives. So thank you, sir, for acknowledging that.
Thank you.
And for your support.
Gentlemen, first off, I'd like to thank you for what you've done, and I'm sure as many cadets and midshipmen here, they would feel the same way, humbled. This is a humbling experience to be able to sit here and listen to your stories. My question is, what advice do you have for those of us who are about to enter into service?
First of all, I'm going to tell you, if it's your choice, if you really love it, go ahead and do it. The advice that I can give you is, no matter what happens in life, don't quit. You're going to have barriers. You're going to have moments that you think that you're not be able to keep going. Don't quit. There's a way. There's a will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, another question?
What support, what different ways can us as officers point those when we acknowledge people that are under our command? What resources do we have to point them in to see that they get the help that they need? What are some of the symptoms that we can look for to go ahead and see that somebody's suffering from something as post-traumatic stress?
I was not a lieutenant, I was not a captain, but as a sergeant and a staff sergeant, I knew when my Marines, I knew their birthdays, I knew their wedding anniversaries. I knew everything about those Marines. And when you get to know your people, you know when something's wrong with them. And that's when you sit them down and you say, look, you need to go get some help, Devil Dog. For yourself, for your family, for them little kids. But the key is knowing your people. I've met too many leaders out there that don't quite grasp that. And they kind of half-step. If you know your people, you'll be fine.
And where do you send them for help, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I mean, we've come a long way. I mean, from 2004, 2005. When you come back from deployment now, all the bases, stations, wherever you're at, there are resources, clinics, hospitals, all the stations have the resources. When I got diagnosed, I had a battalion sergeant major. He hand-walked me down to medical at Parris Island to get me help. Chaplains. Sometimes you don't necessarily need to take them to medical. Maybe they just need to sit down and talk to the chaplain.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
If I can just add, one of the things that
I failed as a leader, and I can look back on it as I didn't believe in mental illness. I didn't believe in PTSD. I didn't believe in TBI. I thought people were just making it up until I got back. And it made it that much harder for me to go and get help. And, you know, I look back and out in theater, people joke about it all the time. And it's one of those where I did nothing about it when my troops were joking about it. So, you know, that's one thing that, you know, as future leaders, you need to recognize that it's real. It's real, and that's something that I didn't realize until I got back.
We have time for one more question. Sir?
First of all, thank you so much for your service. Several of you alluded to issues of alcohol. In perhaps the self-medication issue, what more can be done in issues of addiction to alcohol and other drugs that many wounded warriors and others coming back are affected by, that may be getting in the way of additional treatment?
Well, look at addiction, particularly when they have TBI and post-traumatic stress. Addiction is a symptom of those illnesses. And the biggest thing to do, and like everybody here has said, is when you're making a transition out, you want to make sure that you have a great support network. You have medical facilities that you know, the services that are going to be available to you. And really, it's up to a community effort to help overcome those issues. Done a lot of work with the drug and rehab clinic in Togus, Maine, at the VA center there, and the biggest thing I learned coming back from that is 70% of everybody in the VA system who's admitted to the drug and rehab clinics is diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. So in my opinion, really, when it comes to addiction, that's just kind of one of the symptoms. It's the nature of the beast, and it's still something right now that scientists in the medical community is trying to figure out.
Thank you. On behalf of the American Veterans Center, thank you for being with us for this year's discussion on the Wounded Warrior Experience. A special thank you goes to our presenting sponsor, Military Order of the Purple Heart Service Foundation, with support from the Coalition to Salute America's Heroes, Verizon, Aon, Geico Military, and Amtrak. And finally, thank you to the staff of the United States Navy Memorial for being such gracious hosts for this program. And to all of our servicemen and women of every generation, thank you for your service.